I think it's fitting that the first producer I cover is George Martin. Although he hasn't worked with as many artists as many other producers, his work on almost all the records from the Beatles makes him stand out. He was sometimes referred to as the fifth Beatle. He was born on the 3rd of January 1926 in Highbury, a district in North London. When he was 6, his family got a piano, and that started his interest in music. Apparently he created his first composition called The Spider's Dance at the age of 8. When he finished school, he did various jobs, and towards the end of the Second World War, he spent some time in the military, but none of it in combat. He played music throughout this time. From 1947 to 1950, he studied piano and oboe at the Guildhall School of Music and Drama. After graduating, he worked for the BBC's classical music department, also earning money as an oboe player in local bands. In 1950, he got a job with EMI's Parlophone, and in 1955, he became head of the label. In the late 50s, most of the records on the label were classical, comedy and some skittle. He wanted to add rock and roll, but it took a bit of time to find the artists capable of having hits. By late 1962, he established a strong working relationship with Brian Epstein, who managed a number of Liverpool acts, which led to Parlophone signing up the Beatles, Jerry and the Pacemakers, Cilla Black, Billy J. Kramer and the Dakotas, and the Foremost. All of these acts did very well in the charts. He wasn't happy with what EMI was paying him, considering how much money they were making from his work, and their unwillingness to meaningfully negotiate a better deal for him. So in 1965, he started his own company called Associated Independent Recording, also known as AIR. He took some of the EMI producers with him, including Norman Newell, Ron Richards, John Burgess and Peter Sullivan. Artists associated with Martin's new production team included Adam Faith, Manfred Mann, Peter and Gordon, the Hollies, Tom Jones and Engelbert Humperdinck. Initially, AIR recorded Abbey Road, Decca and other studios. In 1970, they opened their own studios at Oxford Circus in London. Many classic albums were recorded there, including Medal by Pink Floyd, Queen's Sheer Heart Attack, Roxy Music's For Your Pleasure and their 3 following albums, Paul McCartney's soundtrack to Live and Let Die, the Sex Pistols' Nevermind the Bollocks, Wuthering Heights by Kate Bush, and the Pretenders' debut album. T-Rex, Genesis, Supertramp and ELO also did recordings there. It eventually closed in 1991 when its 22-year lease ran out. In 1979 they opened a studio in Montserrat in the Caribbean. More than 70 albums were recorded there in 10 years, including Hot 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 by Arrow, Dire Straits' Brothers in Arms, Ghost in the Machine and Synchronicity by The Police, Elton John's Too Low for Zero, and Steel Wheels by the Rolling Stones. Duran Duran, Ultravox, Lou Reed, Black Sabbath, Eric Clapton and others also recorded there. It closed in 1989 when it was destroyed by a hurricane. In 1992 they opened Studio Lyndhurst in Hampstead, North London. Being one of the very few studios in the world with full orchestral recording capabilities, it has mostly been used for scores for a large number of film and television productions. By the late 60s, the Beatles were on the verge of breaking up, and George's final work with them as a band was the sessions that produced most of what was released in 1970 as the album Let It Be, and their last studio effort, Abbey Road. He produced the first solo album from one of the members of the band after John Lennon announced his leaving, Ringo's Sentimental Journey in 1970, and then worked with Paul McCartney on orchestral arrangements for 4 songs on his 1971 album Ram. He did quite a lot of work with Paul after this. In the years that followed, he produced or had involvement on music by a number of artists including America, Jeff Beck, Neil Sedaka, Cheap Trick, Little River Band, Ultravox, Kenny Rogers, Dire Straits, Pete Townsend, Elton John and Celine Dion. George died 8th of March 2016.